Good morning. Is this on? Hey, all right. Good morning, TV insiders. How you doing? Hope you're having a good start to a lovely Monday morning here in Scottsdale. This is our third version of the TV Insider Summit, and we're thankful that you've all made it out to keep the momentum going in a topic that we're really excited about and bullish about in terms of the future of lots of things. I'm John Whitfield with MediaPost. I run our event sales group. We do about 40 conferences annually, and this being one of them. Today, I'm thrilled to have Mr. Jay Prasad here. He's going to kick things off with a morning presentation, blurring the lines between TV and digital. Jay is the Chief Strategy and Business Officer at VideoAmp. So let's give a big round of applause to Jay to kick things off.
All right, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. This is, I guess, for VideoAmp, the second TV Insider Summit that we've been a part of. We did the one in Florida last summer, and I know there's some people that are same faces from here as there were at that conference. And you know, even in the short 6-7 months, right, since then, it seems like the industry keeps changing, and you know, there's always a lot of moving pieces to keep track of. So today, I wanted to take a second to talk a little bit about how we're seeing things in terms of this notion of the blurring between TV and digital, right? So I think it's pretty safe to say that everyone realizes that the industry is moving towards a more unified and holistic approach to TV and video, but there's a lot of things that are both obstacles and opportunities in that process. So just a little bit about us. We're a self-service software platform really focused on helping marketers and content owners be able to transact seamlessly across screens. And throughout this presentation, you'll get a little bit of a flavor of some of the problems that we're trying to solve and how we're attempting to do so. So I love this quote, and we use this internally a lot too, because sometimes it's difficult, right, when you are a company like us, right, who's just about 60 people, 2.5 years old as a company, and trying to solve such big and important problems. But I think the overall notion here still resists that if we can all work on managing change, and nothing is going to be overnight, nothing has to be too drastic, that will give us an opportunity to really help capture and create some new opportunity and value. This is another thing that even for new hires when they come on board, you have to remember why we're all doing this anyway. So who are the main constituents, right, in a value exchange that starts with the consumer/viewer, right? So this is the person that's either buying the products that we're trying to sell them, or they're consuming content in some way. And today, obviously, content consumption is something that is a very big topic of discussion in terms of how fast it's changing. There's the advertiser and the programmer, or the content owner. So all of these three constituencies need to be able to work holistically in a value exchange that makes sense for everybody. And it's increasingly becoming difficult to understand where one starts and the other ends. But for us, if you focus on the consumer and the viewer, giving them choice, giving them the ability to watch content on any device, whether it's an on-demand format or live TV, and giving them the ability to trade that value in terms of their attention with a targeted ad that isn't too intrusive or doesn't top out at a frequency of 11 on like a VOD program, right, where it's the same ad over and over and over again. You know, these are things that we can solve. And if we solve for them, then all three of these participants in the value exchange here will all be better off. So to help understand sort of why things are changing so fast, you know, as all of these new formats and platforms become available to audiences, it causes them to question things that have always been done a certain way, right? So the number one reason why people are looking to cut the cord is not getting competitive or reasonable rates or pricing. And then a lot of these other things here that are listed, they actually all support that. So just sticker price alone isn't necessarily going to cause people to say, I no longer want to have pay TV. I think it's because they've realized that there's other questions that you can ask. For example, how much am I paying for channels that I never watch? How come it feels like every time I want to add or watch an additional programming, I have to pay for it when I'm already paying so much on a monthly basis? Things like new customers getting better deals than existing ones. I think these are all elements of the fact of an industry that is in change. And I think today and tomorrow, most of the content that I've seen on this agenda is going to tackle these things in a really tactful way and taking a look at all the different components that are creating this kind of change in the value system. Oop. One too far. I think it's also not a surprise that it's the younger audiences that are the ones that are shifting their viewing in the most dramatic way. They're the ones who are augmenting linear TV viewing, which still has the lion's share of video consumption, by the way, for all of the major age demographics. But it's obvious that the younger demographic is catching up, right? Their digital video and traditional TV viewing times are pretty much on a path to converge and then exceed. And then you have to take a look at things like the cord nevers, the cord maybes, the cord cutters. It's now 25% of households in the US, again, from eMarketer. So it looks like that if we don't sort of evolve our tactics and how we approach advertising, that we will end up missing an entire audience, right? Who is not going to be able to be reached at scale in the same ways that adults 35 to 54 are. So as the millennials become not just a label of a demographic that's often derided, but becomes the main purchasing power in our economy, we need to figure out how to best serve them and figure out what are the tactics, tools, and strategies required for that. So one of the things I know that's a hot topic, and there's a lot of great content in the next 2 days, is around OTT. OTT viewership is exploding. I think we can see it very clearly in our business that advertisers are most intrigued and trying to figure out how to crack this. It's one of these things like VOD. It's like that fly ball. Like there's a baseball outing today, right? It's that fly ball between left and center. You know, is OTT and VOD, is it TV? Is it digital? Whose ball is it? Does the TV side own this? Does the digital side own this? And as a result, it's often the ball drops in the middle, right? And I think right now we could all be capturing a lot more value in places like OTT. But some of the things that are holding it back, you know, somewhat perceptions of limited scale. I think the definition of OTT is changing a lot as well, right? Is what Sling is doing by broadcasting live linear through a app, right? That's not like an on-demand like Netflix, but it's still delivered through an over-the-top distribution strategy. So that's also OTT, but it looks and acts a lot like linear TV, right? Last week, YouTube announced its own service very similar to Sling. It was interesting that a lot of these services are actually going to be selling and targeting the ads, for the most part, very similar to how it's already done in linear. And I think that's not necessarily because the parties involved don't want to get it to be more addressable and more precision targeted. It's just what are the things that are holding it back? And I think as an industry, if we looked at solving the problems of unlocking scale by being able to unify audience data, regardless of the platform or app that you're watching on, limited targeting just doesn't really need to be a problem because everything on OTT is IP delivered, so it should be able to get targeted like digital. I said should be, but we're having trouble getting that done at scale. And then measurement and attribution, right? Are we going to take this great new platform and measure it like TV for the last 50 years, or are we going to innovate in how we're going to be able to target and thus have to push how we measure it so that it can actually have the true value that all parts of that value exchange are looking for? It's a very complicated slide. But it does show, for us, a thesis that we're proving out right now with several clients, which is how to take ad delivery utilizing a target, right? So without giving names, I'll just give you a quick example of something that's actually happening. So we were able to take for a wireless client who is trying to sell smartphones, and we were able to take some of the first-party data from that wireless provider, as well as some trusted and verified third-party data on who are the most likely audiences that might switch in the next 6 months to a new phone carrier. And we were able then to create and graph an extension of those audiences, which we got as cookies, right? Now we were able to take those cookies and extend them to device IDs on mobile and OTT devices to be able to find those particular people while they were watching long-form content on OTT devices and mobile devices. And then figuring out how we tracked the overall delivery of the campaign. So we had frequency goals, geography goals, other things that were layered into this campaign that all got put into our delivery system. And then we were looking at trying to measure conversion in a couple of different ways. So one way is to allow the advertiser was allowing us to pixel their app landing page and their website landing pages so that we could actually see which people that were exposed to certain OTT ads, which of them ended up on the site or the app, and what were they doing. And then furthermore, we partnered with a location-based provider, and we're actually measuring in-store traffic lift. So we were actually getting a study that's showing, and this is still ongoing, so I can't give you the results just yet, but we will have them in about 4 to 5 weeks. But were people that were exposed to ads on OTT and then followed up on mobile, what was the sort of propensity for them to actually go into a store? We don't know what they did in the store, and we don't get that kind of tracking, but we can at least say that we actually drove them to a store. Now, that use case could be used for car dealers, it could be used for QSR restaurants, could be used for movies, right? There's a lot of different categories that still actually want people to get off the couch or get out of your house and go do something. And if we can actually target people in a more granular fashion and measure things like that, then OTT that should be the future of addressability, right? We shouldn't treat it like we treated digital video with its constraints or try to recreate the model of linear TV. OTT has the opportunity to really unlock addressability in the future, and a lot of these things that seem pie in the sky are actually now being pioneered and piloted, not just by us, but by a lot of our colleagues and partners that are present here today. So now going into sort of taking a step back, right? OTT and all of these types of targeting tactics end up being sort of what you want to do to take advantage of one particular channel. But if you take a step back, how do you allocate and how do you start at the strategic planning level? So before you actually say how much should be going to live video on Facebook and how much should be going into the upfronts and what should be going into on demand, you want to take a look at, well, what are your overall marketing goals, right? So what does true cross-screen planning look like? What is your total marketing budget or the amount of products or brand engagement you're trying to drive, right, for a particular, doesn't matter what the brand is. And then figuring out if you could leverage quality data, right? I think everyone is also well aware that the rise of the marketing cloud inside the enterprise is drastically changing how brands look at allocating budget. They want to know, based on their CRM data, based on their website data, and based on verified third-party data, how do I look at where I can reach my audience the most effective? I'm looking at all forms of television, web, in-app, OTT, VOD, social video, right? Is not getting smaller, it's exploding. So you got to find a way to give marketers and agencies the ability to look at total video planning, getting an insight to the whole video market and not have to treat things in silos. And if audience-based advertising and new content formats are the future, then we need efficient markets. We can't have opaqueness. I definitely, and I think as a company, and most of the people here, because we are kind of all more around the premium part of the ecosystem, have to realize sort of how bad the other parts of the ad tech ecosystem have set us up, right? In terms of the opaqueness and the lack of quality and sort of building an entire ecosystem on that. That has to stop. And I think it's conferences like this where we do talk about the real things that matter in terms of being able to look at how to allocate a budget into quality inventory and do so with accountability. So there's two schools of thought. If you want to figure out a cross-platform allocation strategy, this is the way on the left, the panel-based approach, which has been done for a long time, right? Our friends at Nielsen really innovated in early, let's call it data science, about being able to take a panel of viewers and pretty much document everything that they're doing and then be able to project that out to census level. So as new channels emerged, you have these overlapping panels, right? So if you have 200,000 on digital and 50,000 on linear, the Venn diagram intersects there in the middle for 20,000. It's those 20,000 people that end up being your cross-platform data set in order to be able to figure out how do you want to now plan against that. So that is an approach, but it's not necessarily the approach that is going to scale. The other approach that is becoming very popular and dominates a lot of the, the headlines and media posts is this whole notion of cross-device user approach. Cross-device is obviously very important because it has to do a lot with identity, right? And identity is predominantly, right, dominated by Google and Facebook, right? They pretty much control online identity, and that online identity is extending into other places. Now, I don't think anyone in this room wants to just sort of throw up their hands and say, all right, well, since Google and Facebook own identity, we'll just let them run with the whole future of our industry, right? There's still a lot that can be done for people who don't control the actual identity, but figuring out how to link devices to identity. And this is a very important approach because it allows you to start looking at TV and digital in a much more blurred fashion. We'll get into that here. So knowing your audience, like one of the things that people say is, well, if you have a cross-device map of all the devices within a household, but there's still like 2 TVs, then you have to solve for that one-to-many problem. How do you know when the TV shows that are being viewed and set-top box data that's giving this to you, without saying there's a lot of headlines right now as well on the use of ACR data or smart TV data, probably sort of unfairly targeting sort of what they're getting, I guess, some unfair headlines because obviously the pay TV industry has been using viewership data to create a lot of value for advertisers, for consumers, et cetera. I think there's just a lot that needs to be done in terms of giving proper notice and making sure consumers are aware of the trade-off that they're making in terms of their data for services. If you do that right, then I think people, generally speaking, are usually okay with it. But if you can figure out a way to solve that in terms of looking at all of the various devices, all of the TVs that are in a household, and then you're going to have to use some complicated data science to figure out who is the most likely person who is viewing and exposed to these ads on TV, and then who did I follow up with on their mobile device or on an OTT device. These are just some of the sort of what we look at as problems and opportunities on the data side to be able to figure out how to know who your audience really is. So here is a very quick sort of sync approach on how to create what we're calling index-based targeting. I know that's actually an actual whole panel here later on, but if you could take first-party data. So again, I viewed it earlier as a lot of brands, especially automotive. I know Mike's giving a talk, and he's done a lot of stuff with addressable. Automakers have wonderful data. They want to use it in their advertising. How do you help them do it? So you work with their first-party data. You work with DMPs and onboarders. We have a lot of partnerships in that space with companies like LiveRamp, Experian, and Axiom, and be able to work with first-party data onboarded into cookies. Then you have to device graph it, right? So if that wasn't complicated enough, now you have to take those cookies and find matches on mobile devices and OTT devices and the likes, and then find a way to match it back to TV IDs or households. So if you take a look at this example of 10 million records that you start with, by the time you get to the end match, you're at 3 million households. So you started at 10 million, you're at 3 million households. That's still a pretty amazing feat to be able to have that level of scale that you started with. And then you have to go back and look at 15 months of past TV viewership data. VideoAmp is a partner with ComScore, and so we have the RentTrack TV Essentials data, which is very rich, and we get terabytes of it every month. And we look back at viewership data at the household level so that we can try to create forecasts against this audience that we just onboarded into software. And now we're going to look back at the last 15 months of viewership data, and we want to create a forecast of what TV shows, day parts, and channels these audiences are going to be watching, right? Again, it's a very big problem, but a really good opportunity. So this really starts to bring more addressability to linear, right? So linear, not addressable, so you're not serving an ad into a set-top box, but you're just trying to find a schedule that you can make against a digital segment. That really starts to help blur the lines between TV and digital. If you can take one common data set and find the best potential day parts and channels, it'll help you understand what's undervalued and what's overvalued in TV programming, right? This can really help revolutionize scatter-based buying because you can use digital data to do it now. And there's also a lot of very interesting use cases around optimizing upfronts using digital data, which is something that we'll have some announcements on in May of this year. So if you can use a digital segment as the common denominator, and you've done that crazy match scenario and data science problem of mapping 15 months of past linear TV viewing against a digital data segment, now you actually have a common denominator that you can use that is going to be everything from one-to-one targeting on digital environments, including OTT, and then getting into index-based targeting on linear, but you're still using the same data set. That'll allow you to create what's called an advanced currency, right? You've taken an advertiser's first-party data, maybe you've added in some precision data from other partners, people who've been to auto dealers, people who've actually viewed television programming. We're doing a lot of work in TuneIn right now. It's a great in entertainment because they love the fact that you can take digital data, combine it with TV viewing data, and create new types of audiences. In the auto example, you want to take a look at both your primary, so your primary audience is people who've recently visited a dealership, so using location-based data, and then your secondary target, you're going to use your adults, right, 18 through 54, and you can now create these kinds of analysis. This is not for the faint of heart, right, all of these numbers and dollar signs, but you're looking at basically concentrations of your primary audience and your secondary audience, and able to look at a TV schedule in a whole new light. Which starts to really start giving you more flexibility in your planning process. So once you've done all this great cross-screen planning and allocation and you're now buying on indexes, then how do you do measurement, right? What should it be? Cross-screen reach and frequency, both Nielsen and Comscore are going to have solutions. I mean, they're sort of derided. I think the market is trying to figure out how to be totally ready for it. Are the programmers ready? Are advertisers ready for it? But cross-screen reach and frequency isn't going to go away. It just has to be not just a TV GRP, but a cross-screen GRP. That has to come. Actually target on linear. So don't just buy based on past models of, using MRI surveys, but actually target using digital data. And then cross-device attribution, right? Actually seeing what traffic you're driving to sites and apps and even locations and having an impact on sales, right? Actually measure sales. All relies on the common denominator. So all of this stuff and everything that we do to really sort of modernize and unify TV and digital starts by making a common denominator that can scale. That common denominator needs to be quality. It cannot be sort of unverified third-party data, just because it's not going to give us that lens of quality that's required. You can also start to do things like much more always-on ROI analysis, right? So you could take a look at a plan and say, well, according to my age and gender, right, this is the kind of ROI metric I was getting. But if I actually targeted people who've been to an auto dealership, I'm looking at efficiencies and savings on my TV plans. And ultimately, those efficiencies end up rolling into other screens so people can take advantage of it. So let's take an opportunity to capture the opportunity, right? And I think that's what I'm hoping to get out of this and hoping to get into some great discussions at the round tables later. And that's all. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Jay, thank you very much. Before we let him go, any questions for Jay before we let him go? We've got maybe a minute or two, not much time. Otherwise, you have a team here, correct?
I do. We have a team here in the back. We're actually looking to get your opinions on things in the industry. We have a little video booth in the back set up, so we'd love to, if you, during breaks, can come and see Rebecca and Dorina in the back here. We have a couple of questions that we'd love to ask you.
Okay, great. Well, if you don't have questions now, please grab Jay later and his team. And yeah, please do go outside and check out the video interview session. Yep, thank you. All right, thanks, Jay. Big hand for Jay. We're going to take a couple of minutes here just to kind of refresh the coffees and reset the room.